This is your day-to-day BYU Sports play-by-play. I'm Spencer Linton, teamed up with Jarom Jordan, and we are pleased to welcome in a third outstanding member of our BYU broadcasting crew. In fact, he is the Utah Sportscaster of the Year.
Hey!
Greg Wrubell. Congratulations,
Congrats,
Greg.
man. That's pretty cool.
Oh, thanks.
They give you like a little plaque or?
I don't know what comes with it. I think you're getting to the back of the alphabet is what's happening.
Wrubell.
Outstanding
That's
stuff.
cool, man.
Well earned, well deserved, and we look forward to much more from you. Starting with tonight for BYU
Yeah,
basketball.
we'll be there tonight. We'll all be involved one way or the other.
We'll be there. Yeah.
Okay, before we get to basketball, I want to talk a little about Big 12 football with BYU. How the divisions are going to be divided up has become a hot topic over the past few days. If you were picking which 5 teams, or with Oklahoma and Texas in the mix, which 6 teams BYU played in the first 2 years of the Big 12, how would you divide up those sides of the conference?
Is it okay to say, like Mark Pope, hey, as long as you're in a division, do what you want with him? I really kind of feel like I'm more intrigued and excited and curious than I am demanding at this point. I think I'll accept whatever they come up with, because it'll be 10 or 12 decision makers or beyond that with the commissioner, getting together and figuring out what makes sense for the entire league. I think whichever way it turns out, it's going to be fun and great and exciting and a wonderful new phase of BYU athletics. I think geographically, maybe not as much of a sweat as there maybe used to be. Nowadays, once you're up in the air, you're in the air. I mean, you're going 500 miles an hour. It's easy to get places.
Be all right.
It's easy to get places. Yeah. But I think, BYU being, the westernmost schools and Texas has the other westernmost schools. I think a lot of folks look to that natural alignment, if you will. If it goes there, that's great. I think the north-south thing was intriguing. It kind of spreads you across the country a bit, and that's got its own element of interest to it. So I'm just like, bring it on. Let's go.
I'm very interested to see, and Jarom and I were just talking about this, the rivalry factor, because Utah, when they went to the Pac-12, they got Colorado.
Who's BYU's Colorado, Greg?
Is TCU BYU's natural Colorado because of the previous games?
So I was thinking a bit about this too, and I think because there's some history, I mean, BYU's played more games against TCU than any other team in that league, obviously. So, yeah, TCU's the one where you have some history at least. And let's not forget, once Gary Patterson got to TCU and Andy Dalton was there, TCU began to turn the tide as a program, and certainly against BYU. So I think TCU is a natural. I really liked the vibe of Baylor this past fall. Once you got there, and again, you have 2 religiously based, private institutions. That's kind of a natural fit in a way. So I think Baylor becomes something, somewhat natural there. Houston has a bit of a history with BYU, some games in the past. Those are the ones that come to mind, but I think TCU is the most natural one. But I think it will be great to get to venues BYU's not been before. Like as broadcasters, we have bucket list places. The Fog, going to Allen Fieldhouse is one of those places, and that'll be a regular part of the routine now. So that's another part of it that I'm really looking forward to, is new places, new venues, and new feel. I was in the car with Mark Durant. We were driving through San Francisco on Saturday night and talking about where we've been, and we've been through the WCC, or rather the WAC venues, then the Mountain West venues, the WCC venues, and now a 4th different conference of venues.
You're like the pioneers, but in broadcasting. Just making their way around the country.
We've been able to kind of, circumnavigate all these different leagues and create, different associations and friendships and get used to different, routines, restaurants and hotels and arenas. And it's just a great life to be able to go, as long as we've gone a quarter of a century, and be in this many different leagues and still have some novelty going on. I think it's great.
Is this ancient Israel 40 years to get to its destined home? You go back 40 years to the 80s, BYU's in the WAC.
Yeah.
Finally, after you find the Big 12. You find
the journey, the promised land.
Yeah. The Salt Lake Temple got built in that amount of time. There's something to that, Spence. I think Baylor makes perfect sense, because I know everybody that wanted to go to Dr. Pepper and Magnolia Lanes and the whole deal. I think that's a great fit for this culture and the hat wearers and the bloggers and whatever. Okay.
Love the Texas trips, and I think BYU's fan base, if you're going to go anywhere in the Big 12, that's kind of where you have a lot of, but then again, once they hit those Midwest venues that they don't really go to, you'll see how many people are drawn to there. I think that's going to be one of the coolest things, is these Big 12 schools and fan bases will find out what it's like to have BYU draw from kind of all these different pockets of the country. And like, whoa, how is this team from Provo showing so well in this arena here right now?
BYU fans are gathering in Manhattan, Kansas.
Yeah.
It's in Ames, Iowa.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
Okay, Nevada is, there's a contract there that was signed in November. BYU has yet to announce this, but Nevada, a reporter brings this up, that's the 2024 opener. So assuming we have 9 conference games, it feels like we basically know what 2024 is going to be, assuming you still play Utah, and that if BYU still opts to play in FCS, feels like, okay, we know what non-con essentially will be. What's your opinion on kind of the scheduling philosophy, if it is that, and kind of what would be your preference if you could?
I think it's actually pretty simple. Your 9 league games, P5, G5, FCS. Let's go.
That's what I want, too.
Every year.
And do you want that P5 to be Utah almost every time?
I think it can be Utah when it makes sense, but I think there'll be times when it doesn't for either school or both. And so you find a different P5. But and there could be some years where the P5 is Utah, the G5 is Utah State, and the FCS could be Weber State. You could have an in-state non-conference schedule, if you will, in certain years you want to do it that way.
Weber State would be a hard FCS.
But that's like an example of how you could go P5, G5, FCS and still keep the in-state component. Maybe not every year, but a lot of those years you could have 1, 2, or 3 of those teams involved.
Should BYU play road G5 games? I'm of the opinion that I would love to get to a 7 home game situation. Ensure a bowl game, ensure max wins, be a big program. Does BYU need to go and play road G5s anymore?
I think it depends on who. Yeah, but I don't think you can't go to play that game.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
It's circumstantial. Now, I am not opposed to in 2024 specifically having Utah, Nevada, and then keeping the Hawaii game on the schedule because they're in Provo, and Hawaii's never won in Provo, Greg. So are you okay if Hawaii stayed on the schedule instead of an FCS?
If that's the schedule you put in front of me, Spencer, I'll take it. I will broadcast that schedule.
I said, hey, the last matchup was Hawaii BYU lost, so I would actually prefer an FCS game in that situation. But yeah. Okay, let's talk about the transfer portal, and we haven't gotten your comment kind of on replacing Tyler Odio, Christopher Brooks, Houston Heimuli, and of course the running backs that are returning. There's some real quality there. How do you feel about that group against another tough schedule?
Yeah, I think the fact that we do have, or BYU does have, Peeney and Hinckley and Miles Davis and Jackson McChesney is kind of a strong nucleus already in that room. I think what they bring in just, increases the competition, the chance to get through a year unscathed at that spot. Now, let's also note, Tyler Algier, for as many issues as there were on the offense with guys missing games, that's a guy that just didn't miss. Like, he was really, really durable and really reliable. And I think that we need to kind of applaud him personally and the fact that they had that kind of consistency at the running back room. You didn't see other guys have to really, show themselves as much as they might have been needed otherwise. And now we get to see those guys now truly compete for a spot. Chris Brooks got beyond 5 yards a carry this past year at Cal. There's still a lot of tread on those tires. He has 382 carries, I think, over 4 years. That's 10 carries a game over 38 games, which I think is what he's played. So 10 carries a game. Again, there's a lot of gas left in that tank. I mean, I think he could have a great year because he's not been overworked, overloaded in any stretch. And I look most forward to the competition. Who really, truly emerges and does, do the coaches say we've got a guy, or are we going to be basically, dividing 25 to 30 carries amongst 2 or 3 guys on a given game?
We've never talked about it like this, but he's in a contract year. In the NBA we do. He's trying to get a contract in the NFL. So the motivation is super high.
Okay, let's transition to basketball before we have to say goodbye to the Utah Sportscaster of the year. There's only so much time in Greg Wrubell's
You'll always be with us with the photo. We're good.
Okay, so we have termed St. Mary's, San Francisco, and Gonzaga as St. Franzaga this year. They're the other big three,
just be St. Zaga,
aside from BYU.
Franzaga.
But 4 teams, including BYU, pacing to make the NCAA tournament, so they're kind of in that group. Does BYU have anything to gain in a game tonight against San Diego, a game that on paper BYU should dominate? If so, what is it that BYU can gain tonight against San Diego?
Stay perfect in the Q3s and Q4s. Mark Pope, I still think it's a remarkable thing. I mean, sometimes you have bad nights at the wrong place at the wrong time. It happens. There are some really good teams this year that have Q3 losses. BYU in 3 years with Mark Pope has never had a Q3 or Q4 loss. So my objective for the team is to get to the end of the year and still say that Mark Pope and his guys have never lost a Q3, Q4 game. Let's keep in mind, there are 12 games left right now, 11, 12 if you reschedule Portland. Let's say 11 or 12 games left. Of those 12, let's say it's 12 right now. If they do reschedule Portland, I'm not sure they will. Either way.
Hopefully
Either
not.
way. So if it's 12, 8 are Q3, Q4s. Okay, so those are 8 games you kind of have to win, and then you have 2 remaining in Q1 and 2 remaining in Q2. So just winning the Q4 or Q3, Q4 games, that gets you to 11 wins in league if you can do that. You find another win, you're at 12 or 13, I think is putting you in a really good spot going into the postseason. That's what BYU has to do. It's kind of they're in kind of a take care of business mode right now. And that's what they've been in under Mark Pope since the get-go. And that really has to just get maybe more attention than it does get. They're winning a majority of the hard games, the Q1s and Q2s, and never having a bad loss. You know, a true quote-unquote bad loss.
Yes.
And we'll consider Q3s and Q4s to be the bad losses.
100%.
Yeah.
BTO time. Taking care of business.
Yeah, exactly. Back when Turner Overdrive. Canadian band. Great Canadian band.
Yes.
Yeah.
Greg, great to have you with us.
Bachman. Remember the church?
Yeah, Randy Bachman. Yeah.
And his son Tal had a one-hit wonder.
He did. Yes, he did.
I got his autograph one day.
He's so high.
Yeah.
High above me.
Yeah. So good. So good.
So lovely.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, she is.
All right.
Thanks, Greg.
All right.
Thanks,
Anytime,
Sportscaster
guys.
of the Year, Greg.